Why in heaven's name would you want to move to Walnut Creek? This is what my mother said in the summer of 1958. I had been born and raised in Berkeley all of my life, and I guess she thought I would be there forever. And I told her that the weather was better than Berkeley, and that my husband and I could buy a brand new modern house for about $20,000 in the Eichler tract. Mr. Eichler was a builder who sold homes to anyone who had the money. So we were confident that we could qualify, as we were both teachers in the Berkeley Unified School District. Alan also had the GI Bill. Little did we know that the bank had different ideas. We were very disappointed when the bank turned us down. And they turned us down because I, at that time, was of childbearing years, whatever that means. We went back to the office, the sales office, to tell them that we had to cancel our order for our new house. The salesman told us to go home and that he would call us later. He called us back in about a week and told us to go back to the bank and sign the papers, and that Mr. Eichler had taken care of it for us. That was our first confrontation with prejudice in Walnut Creek. We moved into the house in December 1958, and we're still there. Lots of liberal-thinking people lived in the neighborhood. 4 or 5 families were Unitarians, and they invited us to go to church with them. Aaron Gilmartin was the new minister and well known for his civil rights activities. We joined Mount Diablo Unitarian Church in 1961. Soon after we started our family, and both children attended religious education. They got along well and had no problems with the other children. They did say that their church friends were curious about their hair and thought it was cool that they had a tan all year round. Children are open and accepting, which shows that prejudice is taught. As our family was growing up, we attended church on Sundays, but we were not involved in groups or classes. Once the kids were in college, we became more active. Me more so than Alan, because he was commuting to Berkeley every day. We are very active now, and times are changing. We always wonder why more people of color don't come here, and when they do come, they often don't come back. Why? There are many reasons. One, when you and a visitor, when you ask a visitor where they are from or what they do, it causes guests to be defensive. These two questions have race and class implications. I'm sure that many of you are unaware of this. It is much better to say, welcome. How did you find us? Can we help you get coffee or tea? Do you have children for the RE? Those are the kinds of things that guests would want to hear. Most of you know that I am an usher. One Sunday earlier this year, I was ushering, and Linda Russell was either the worship associate or the minister for the day, I forgot which. A guest or a member of our church came up to me in the back as I was sorting the orders of service and told me that she appreciated the words that I had spoken. And I could have said thank you, but I didn't. I had to explain that that was Linda, not me. When I see this lady now, she speaks and she's very nice and she knows that she made a boo-boo. And we just smile and just go on like nothing has happened. But I think she learned a lesson. Our son and another young man in this congregation are mistaken for each other. I call this other young man my second son, and he is not African American. He became a U.S. citizen a few months ago, and several people have congratulated my son, who was born in Kaiser, Walnut Creek. But But he told me that 2 of these people had mailed notes apologizing for the mistake. And this is a positive step. If you make a mistake, correct it. Racism is alive and well in some individuals at MDUUC, and it pops up when you least expect it. We all have to be on our toes. If you hear something racist, say something. Alan and I love this church and are not going anywhere. Beloved Conversations has helped us to understand, and we are going to do whatever it takes to make MDUUC a welcoming community so that everyone feels comfortable here. And may it be so.
And I am Linda Russell. When I was working in the AIDS world, I used to tell people, although quite frightening, the virus did not scare me because I knew what it was and how to protect myself. It's naivete that scares me. That is deadly. So what do I mean by that? The virus continued to spread long after we learned what it was and what causes it. The naivete started with the "you only can catch it if you're gay," then gay or an injection drug user, then gay, injection drug user, or prostitution. So people could tell themselves that as long as they were not a part of one of these communities, they didn't have to worry about AIDS. Almost 40 years after the epidemic first began, we know that this is not true, but we still have people who believe they simply can't catch it. That naivete is very dangerous. In our country today, we are seeing fear and hate on the front page and in the 6 o'clock news on a daily basis. This is not shocking to me or most people of color that I know. It is something we have known all along, something that is part of our worldview, our collective unconscious, and it is something that on a primordial level, we maintain vigilance in order to survive. To be naive would be dangerous, and it often leads to discounting a significant experience of people of color. Earlier this year, one afternoon after I had co-facilitated a Beloved Conversation session with Reverend Leslie and Jim Lewis in the Gilmartin building, I walked out to take some things to my car and finish a conversation with Jim after a particularly spirited session. I went back into the building to get the rest of my things. There were several white women standing there who were not from the church, about to start another meeting. They all looked at me in surprise and froze for a moment. I will say my honest initial reaction was to think, y'all look scared. But I just smiled, asked God to hold my tongue, and said hello and walked back to the room where I had just held Beloved Conversations and shook my head. Some of you hearing this story may think, well, they probably didn't mean anything, they just didn't know you. My response is, no, I know the face. I know the freeze. I recognize the protective stance. It is the same reason I clear my throat when I'm coming down the aisle in a grocery store and there's only one person there, sometimes an older white person. If you are going to clutch your bag or get startled, please do it before I am standing next to you reaching for the peanut butter. Does it happen all the time? No, but it is tiring when it does, and it's equally tiring trying to address the bigger issue with people who tell me that they're not prejudiced and sometimes go on to explain why my thinking is a mere misunderstanding. So where do I take heart? Where do I see healing? I take heart in the other images, the ones the news folks don't highlight, the ones where a lot of white people are standing holding up signs that say Black Lives Matter, I take heart when white people stand next to brown and black people to talk about immigration rights. I take heart when I look around this sanctuary and I see people struggling with this very complex discussion of white supremacy, and you stay with it. Not just for my sake, but as an extension of our faith and the sense of community and wanting to be whole in a new way. To stay in this work means to create a new collective unconscious. I take heart that 2/3 of the 1,200-member UU congregations across the U.S. participated in the original white supremacy teach-in this past spring, which has led to requests for more, which have been happening around the country for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Especially interesting to me was hearing the UU minister, Krista Taves, who did a teach-in in Quincy, Illinois, a small town that's 96% white, congregation 99% white. But it was members of the congregation that went to the board to request the teach-in. Reverend Taves, a white minister, explained that the shame response that comes when white people hear the words white supremacy is a response to intense internal trauma. She goes on to talk about letting go of the sense of shame that can keep you angry and move you to shut down, and instead to recognize the oppression experienced within the white supremacist culture affects us all. To those of you who were at Selma or any other place in history where you stepped up to say enough, white supremacy is a slap in your face as well. As we work to reshape our collective unconscious, let me leave you with Layla Ibrahim's Imperfect Blessing and the Sacred Mess. Because we are not in church to be with people who want to sing the same music or rally for the same cause or attend the same retreats. We are in church to learn to love better. We disagree, we annoy, we flake out on one another. And we worship, we support, we hold, and we affirm one another. There is really only one choice between the imperfect community and no community. Again and again, we are all called to choose to commit ourselves to building a more just, more diverse, and yet ever messy and imperfect beloved community. We are in this together.